Welcome. So we are back with another episode of the Adapt Performance Podcast. In today's episode then, we are covering the topic of blood flow restriction training, so BFR, its origins and what it's kind of used for. We're also going to go through how blood flow restriction can be used with patients with patellofemoral pain syndrome, okay, which is it's knee pain, okay, but a specific type of knee pain. So Jourdain, okay, so despite it looking like it's Jourdain, it is Jourdain, okay. So I know Jourdain when I moved over to Warwick. Jourdain was one of the development coaches, one of the interns there, and we couldn't have two Jourdains on the staff, and I kind of won that. So I was Jourdain, he got demoted to Jourdain, so I stole his name. But it's sick to see that he's gone on. Well, one is a great bloke, I never doubted it, but really smart person as well. And I'm not surprised that he went on to do what he's doing, and he's doing a PhD at St Mary's in that specific area, so blood flow restriction and patellofemoral pain syndrome. So there's a lot of good chat around the usability of that training tool, some considerations if you are thinking about using it, if you're somebody that would be a good candidate for that, okay? So I'm going to get straight into the episode here. I'm not going to waffle on too much because I think there's a lot of really good stuff that you're going to take away from this. So if you have got any questions about blood flow restriction training, okay, head over to him on some of his social media accounts. I'm sure he'd love to have a chat with you about it. And then same again for me. If you want a little bit of my take on this particular training method, I can't give you much in terms of patellofemoral pain syndrome. That is definitely a question for him and probably for a medical professional if you think you are somebody that is kind of struggling with that. But give us some feedback, okay? If you like it, share it, tell somebody to come and listen to it. We want more people here, okay? We want more people, more listeners, more watchers. That's a fair point, more watchers as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice there's been a little bit of an upgrade. So basically changed. So the original podcast platform I was using was Zoom, okay? And Zoom's great. Zoom was really good. I already had a Zoom account, so it didn't cost me any money or any extra money. But I've basically upgraded to what we call Riverside FM. And Riverside FM is actually a podcasting platform. Okay, their slogan is made for podcasters, from podcasters, that type of thing. It's really cool so far. So this will be the first proper episode I've recorded on this, which was cool. So when I was downloading the file after I finished with Jourdain, when it first came up, he had no sound, and I was like, oh no, that was an hour and 10 minutes of like high quality information, which just wouldn't come out the same if we had to repeat it. So, but no, we was fine. I figured it out. I put my nerd glasses on, and I figured out the issue. Yeah. Anyway, so as always, let us know if you enjoy the episode. Hope you get something from it. I know I definitely learned a lot in this episode. So good stuff. Let's get into it. Hey, we're in. Yes, mate. How we doing? We all right?
Yeah, good, mate. You?
Yeah, I'm fine, mate. I don't know if you can tell just behind my shoulders, but I've got a fresh new office chair. This is first time I've like busted it out of the packaging as well, and I'm absolutely buzzing. Took me ages to put up, but you know what? It's worth it. It's comfy, and that's how I know that I'm old, when I'm buzzing off like little bits of furniture like this.
I was about to say, when you're getting old, when that's the type of thing that you're really excited about.
Ridiculous. What have you been up to today, mate?
Not much, mate. Just been working. We did some taking over running the placements for St Mary's for our students. So just had some chats with some coaches that are looking to take on some of our students on placements and whatnot this morning. Walked the dog.
Sick.
Nothing crazy.
Love that. Your placement stuff, is that so we had to do a second year placement and it was like 6 to 8 weeks. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So they don't our placements go out to all our students, and they can be applied for by anyone. But I think in third year they've got a requirement to do 60 hours, and I think on the masters, so on the on-site masters, they've got a requirement to do 100 hours.
Got you.
But obviously we know how important it is that you go out and get some experience alongside your degree. So we have loads of providers coming in and they're seeking students that want to get some experience, but because obviously they need a hand out in the clubs, students need to get some experience. That's happy days really, but they go out to everyone.
Is that like the providers? This is me thinking of my own stuff now. I'm seeing cogs turning. Do you get people? Is it like football clubs, rugby clubs, private facilities? Do you just get anybody and everybody, or is it like specific types of providers?
We've had everyone so far. So like I've been doing the role for a couple of weeks now, and had a look at what we've had in the past. So we've had some private providers that are near the university, so private gyms. But at the moment, we've got a couple of football clubs. So Fulham are advertising with us, Charlton. We've got some rugby, GB, kayak, schools. I was speaking to schools this morning. So just a bit of everything, which is great because the students have a rough idea of where they want to go and what they want to do. So it allows them to be a bit more flexible in their approach. Instead of just applying for a placement because they need a placement, and find something that's tailored to their interests, which is great.
That's cool. I literally what I'm kind of thinking through there. This is just like an adapt side, and I'm getting all my thoughts out there. I'm always trying to be open with this stuff, like what's going on behind the scenes in terms of building a business. But one of the guys who I follow on Instagram, he basically has like a placement student, but from a media college. So he basically, he isn't going for the S&C side, he's going for media, just so they can run the behind the scenes stuff. And I thought that's actually clever, and I think he did 6 months of like an internship of like working underneath him in that sense. And then he's turned it into a job for him, and I think it's great for this lad because he's probably 16, 17, just finished like his first year of college. Now he's in like all right money, So yeah, that's cool. That's funny. Did you do a placement in your undergrad as well? Where'd you do that?
I did several. So in my undergrad, I wouldn't say it's a placement, but during my undergrad, I ran the boxing team for the university. So during the second and third year, I did everything on that, from actually coaching the technical side of the sport, but doing all the conditioning and strength work. So that was sort of an unofficial one. My first official ones came when I was doing my masters. So that was Northampton Saints, Bedford's Performance Centre, their HPC. So that was doing like biomech testing and some training of scholars and external athletes, and then went into some schools, the Connolly Foundation. So I went into schools that did health-based PE rather than the sort of standard national curriculum, and we just tailored that to whatever turned up on the week, whatever advice they wanted, whatever they wanted to learn. So it was quite nice and rounded for my master's year. Got a lot of different exposures.
Yeah, that's sick. Right, cool. We've done a roundabout, so let's go back to the beginning real quick then. Give everyone a little bit of an elevator pitch, give them a little bit of an idea of who you are, what you've done, what you're doing now.
So my background, sporting wise, as a kid was in football and boxing. Or as every young lad does in the country, played football from a really young age up until I was still playing a couple of years ago. Started boxing to get fit and fell in love with it. Decided to go to university because that's the side of things that I was really interested in. I think my boxing coach was potentially a little ahead of the curve, even though that he was quite old, in the fact of, well, you don't run 10 miles in a boxing ring. Everything's short, sharp, fast. You need to be out doing sprints, blah, blah, blah. Wanted to know why that happened, why I felt so much better for doing what I was doing. So went and did sports science and coaching as an undergrad at Bedford, followed up by my master's in S&C at Bedford, doing the placements that I just spoke through. So Saints, Connolly Foundation, Human Performance Centre. then came to Warwick for 2 years, kind of 2 years, kind of got finished off by COVID a little bit, and had a baby while I was there, so that broke things up as well. But that was a really great experience. I learned a hell of a lot in the 2 years that I was there. We got to, so for anyone that doesn't know about the internship there, we pretty much got to lead our own clubs, our own scholars through whatever we thought was right, being assisted by, in my second year, yourself and Nick, and then in my first year, it was a guy called John and Nick, which was great because we got to make loads of mistakes in a low risk environment.
Yeah, that's you know what, going back to that, I think that there's kind of that, I'm trying to think how to put it. Sometimes I feel like interns and people that are coming through, and I thought this a little bit, you kind of consider yourself as free labor, you know, a little bit of a slave sometimes. And I think sometimes people do use interns in that regard, you know, get them on warm-ups, because I can't be asked to do warm-ups. And that's wrong. You know, I think you can learn a hell of a lot doing that type of thing. But Warwick definitely felt different to me in that sense. You know, I'm sure if you was going to speak to the big wigs and the pointy heads in Warwick, they'd see us as just free labor. But the whole vibe around the development side and actually trying to guide you through mistakes, it just felt so different. It felt like a really, and I suppose that's down to Nick, you know, kind of crafting that environment and, you know, making it okay for you to fail and pushing you to have conversations with different people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, mate, it was fantastic. I'd highly encourage anyone to go and do it. Like I said, I learned a hell of a lot there. And I think the nice thing as well is you've got, at the time there's 5, maybe 6 other interns making all the same mistakes, going through all the same processes that you're going through. Because I know, like, interning at big clubs can be a lonely place. Like, you feel like you can't ask the questions for fear of failure or fear of looking a certain way. As where when you've got that number of other interns running their own clubs, working with their own scholars, you get them organic conversations that are so important to your development. So I thought it was great.
Absolutely. It's, you know, there's the good thing as well is you get such a variety of people coming through, you know, and everyone's got the different strengths, different weaknesses, different interests. And there's never going to be a right or a wrong answer with S&C and sports science and those types of things. It's just, you know, the appropriate tool at the appropriate, you know, time in the environment, that type of thing. But I really like the variety, you know, and I think I kind of missed Erica because she was like the year before me. But from what I hear, she was kind of really bubbly, really loud, that type of thing, you know, and I heard she was really good at like the warm-up game side of things and could get people riled up and all that. You know, and then you've got the different style. You've got people that are a little bit quieter, a little bit more thought out. Every word is deliberate, less of a personality. And I love that side of like looking at a team and how it's been crafted. I just think it's interesting to see how those pieces like fit together.
100%. Like I went in as the science geek probably. If you typify a young S&C coach, I think you've got the really, really good coaches, and then you've probably got the science geeks that really like the intricacies of what's going on and program design and whatnot. And if we just take Erica as an example, she was probably the complete flip opposite of what I was. So we probably clashed a bit. But like from my development, I learned a lot by watching her and watching the way that she interacted and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I think it's great to have such a mix of backgrounds, personalities, experience.
For sure.
I think Erica was quite a bit older than us as well, so
yeah,
she had that life experience as well, which it was really obvious to see. So
that's cool. And what are you doing now then? So where you at the present day?
Yeah, so present day I am at St Mary. So the main chunk of my time is I'm at St Mary's Uni. So I'm a grad teaching assistant, which means that half of my time is spent teaching on the undergraduate degree. So I do a few lectures, and then the large bulk of my workload is in delivering all the practical side of the first and second year, because especially first year they spend a lot of time in the gym, which is awesome, because I think it gets everyone on a level playing field, but they also get that feeling of okay, this is what it's like to train properly and hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my more the side that I deliver. The other half of what I'm doing at St Mary's is I'm now coming up to 2 years, probably a little bit longer anyway, because I started before it started, but 2 years into a part-time PhD.
Cool.
Which I'm looking at the effects of blood flow restriction on people with patellofemoral pain syndrome, and it's how it could potentially change biomechanics, strength, muscle mass, and like pain,
Yeah.
which has been really interesting. But as a S&C, someone with an S&C background, has been really, really challenging because it's really multidisciplinary in things that I have never spent much time doing or didn't know that well to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a large part of it that's based around biomechanics of human movement because we're using 3D analysis integrated with force plates. So there's that and a coding element within that. There's sort of the more clinical side of working with people in pain. Then there's pain science.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
yeah, it's been a really steep learning curve.
mate, and it gets you better though. It gets you better quick. You know, if you survive it, you know, you've just gone through a huge growth, you know, in learning and knowledge, I guess. How long are you expecting the PhD to take you? So you're 2 years in, what are you thinking?
How long's a piece of string?
Yeah.
Max, I think, is 7 years if you take a year's extension right up at the end. I don't want it to take that long. So, for a reference point, within the 2 years part time, I'm just about to start the second study.
Okay.
And we're probably 65-70% of the way through the first one. There's some problems with recruitment. Recruitment's just tough generally for pain patients, unless you're linked up with a hospital.
Yeah.
Or you have your own physio practice, but even then it can be tough.
Yeah, it's 3 studies, right? 3 studies in a PhD, then a write up.
3 to 4.
Okay.
Some people more think it kind of depends on the route you take. So, like a cliche I heard early on that made me cringe was every PhD is different, and you're sat there like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Like you're sat there as 3 naive student that doesn't know the process. Come on, right. Give over. Yeah. Oh god, they're all so different. Like if you start off, so I think like a normal route into a PhD would be to start off with some sort of meta-analysis and systematic review, just so you get a feel of where you are within the literature. It's a nice way to learn, but also at the same time to put something out there. And then studies off the back of that. I think if you're going to do a training study or a couple of training studies, longitudinal ones, they probably hold a little bit more weight because you're taking 12 weeks and working with 25 people, let's say. That's going to take a year and a half to complete potentially. Yeah. So it really just depends on what you're putting out there.
Sick. Cool. I want to dig into that, mate. So I guess, does it make sense to you if we kind of go through what is patellofemoral pain syndrome and then kind of talk about how blood flow kind of feeds into that?
Yeah, let's do it. I think that's a logical way to go.
Yeah, so what is it? What is patellofemoral pain syndrome?
So all it is a pain at the front of the knee. It's characterized by over like a 3 out of 10 perceived rating of pain, getting pain in tasks such as like squatting, stairs, kneeling down, anything with a higher level of knee flexion. Usually comes around because of, my train of thought is it usually comes around because of 2 sort of very different scenarios. It's usually with people that are training, so like athletes, it's usually going to be a workload management problem most of the time. So we see it a lot in runners, in longer distance runners, where they're just ramping up the volume of work they're doing probably a little bit too quick and don't have the capacity to cope with it. Or from the Gem Pop that I've seen so far, it kind of seems to be just a general lack of capacity and good quality movement. So they're generally pretty weak because they don't train, they don't do much, and then they don't move that well because again they've never been coached through trying to train, and then they'll go into a new job. So example like a nurse where they've gone from an office job to being a nurse and doing 15 to 20,000 steps a day.
Yeah.
And then their knees are going, ouch, what have you done to me? Why are you making me walk so much? So that's the probably two main subcategories, but that's not really within research. Like,
okay. So with
that's
that
just
then,
from what I've seen.
what so I'm just thinking about. So I've had knee pain in the past, and you know back in the day, everyone was like, "Oh, you've got jumper's knee, you've got patellar tendonitis or tendinopathy, whatever." And I was like, "Well, I hear you with that, but my pain it's not below the kneecap, okay? It's actually above the kneecap, you know." And then you start looking at, okay, what else kind of feeds into that? Is it a quadricep tendonitis or tendinopathy? And the other things that people say is, okay, maybe you've got patellofemoral pain syndrome, and I haven't looked into it in a little while, so I'm not well versed in it or anything. But what is, you know, if you look at like patellar tendinopathy, like, okay, there is an issue with the patellar tendon. So what is it with patellofemoral pain syndrome? Where is the direct point? Is it a kneecap issue? Is it where everything's inserting, or is that the question?
So the problem with using the terminology of like patellofemoral pain syndrome or like runner's knee or anterior knee pain is that they're probably all a bit of a wastebasket term.
Okay.
So like it kind of catches everything that we can't or that people can't diagnose without scans or without anything obvious going on. So like I think you could quite comfortably uh, rule out like tendon problems. Oh, sorry, my phone's just playing silly buggers. There we go. I wanted to update. Cheers. But yeah, you could probably quite comfortably rule out tendon problems within certain movements. So like jumping and landing, and as opposed to squatting. So it probably comes with sort of the higher magnitude type movements, as opposed to potentially just squatting, kneeling down, walking up and down stairs. It may be more painful coming down the stairs than it may be going up the stairs with tendons. But I think the pain people experience with patellofemoral pain syndrome is a bit more diffuse in nature. There's not one real area. It can come on anywhere around the sort of kneecap area. Okay. It can come laterally, it can come behind, and it can be like a deepish sort of pain. People present quite differently, so I think we look at them sort of criteria. We look at the type of sport or activities that people may be doing in their daily lives, and then we rule out red flags for other pathologies, and go from there. And then if you've done all that, you kind of, so it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So if you can exclude everything else, you're probably left with this wastebasket term of you've got patellofemoral pain syndrome.
I hear you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So with that then, the blood flow restriction side, let's have a little bit of a chat around that. What is blood flow restriction? What is it? What is it not? You know, what does the current literature say it's good and bad for?
So I'm just going to say BFR because blood flow restriction training is a mouthful. BFR is, for anyone that hasn't seen it, we apply like a cuff high up on the limb, and we look into restrict blood flow to the limb. We then train in several different ways. It can be done passively also. And from that, we're seeing increases in strength and size that are comparable to high-low sort of more traditional training. Say comparable because strength increases probably aren't quite as good as what you'll get with traditional training. Increases in size are more comparable. They're pretty much the same, if not potentially a little bit better with BFR. But again, I would say jury's out on that one, because for most people it's a really novel stimulus, and we know when you apply novel stimulus, the stress response is a bit higher. So yeah, that's that. And we typically go to like higher levels of what's called limb occlusion pressure on the lower limb than we do on the upper limb. So we look to occlude the lower limb to between 60 and 80% of the total limb occlusion pressure in the lower limb, and probably more like 40 to 60 in the upper limb. And then if I just use training as an example, because it's the easy one, the set and rep schemes are pretty high compared to normal training. So the first, it's generally made up of 4 sets, and it looks like a really high volume first set of 30 reps, followed by 3 sets of 15. And for anyone that's done it with a cuff, I know you have, it's pretty tasty. It can be a bit brutal.
It burns.
It does. Yeah, I remember the first time squatting with it, and I was warned.
Yeah,
and I didn't take my warning.
It's a mad feeling, mate. Like I can remember reading about blood flow restriction, and they called it occlusion training at the time, and was it the first study Katsu, like the Japanese thing?
Yeah.
So I can remember reading about this when I got my first ever gym instructor job, which was at the Grimsby Institute gym. It was like a student-led gym, and my kind of main resource for learning was like T-Nation and that type of thing. And we'd go through, I went through the article, and it was on hypertrophy at the time, and they were speaking through the different mechanisms at the time that were, science backed. So there was mechanical tension, getting stronger. There was waste product, muscle damage, and then the other side of like the waste product buildup. And then they kind of led on to Katsu training. So we tried it, and we didn't have, all the fancy equipment and all that stuff. So we bought some knee wraps from MyProtein, some elasticated knee wraps. And, I think what they said at the time is you just want to do it to a tightness of 7 out of 10 or something like that. And it's so hard to find that 7 out of 10. You're either at a 12 out of 10 or you're at a 3. Your arms either fell off or you've done nothing. It was really kind of difficult and hard to work with. But you know what? Like the instant results that I felt, one, I felt like I had a pump for 2 days. Like I genuinely just felt like I had swelling. My arms were this big. It was insane. So with blood flow restriction training, then, so you said you can use lower loads. It's like 20%, right?
Yeah. So between 20, and some have gone all the way up to 40. Although I think 40 is really tough.
Yeah. Okay. So 20 to 40% of your 1 rep max, and you can still get the same hypertrophy stimulus than if you did normal. And some of the common arguments, if you go on Instagram, you go on Twitter, you go on those things, and I think it's starting to change a little bit. But the comments I was seeing more so was, don't bother if you're not injured. That was the vibe they were giving. If you can lift high loads, why would you not chase the strength gains as well as the hypertrophy gains? What's your kind of thoughts with that in terms of the context of it?
I think it's a tough one. I think it's definitely has more of a place in the injured population, and I'll go on to talk a bit about like the pain research later and how we might use it a little bit differently to what's being used currently. But I think it really just sort of depends. Like I've seen talk recently from some bodybuilders and bodybuilding coaches that cycle it on and off, because the increases, or like the metabolic overload is insane compared to what you're doing, or what you can achieve just with normal load. In my opinion, I've never felt anything like it without putting a cuff on. The strength gains are still pretty potent. They're just not as potent as using normal high-low resistance training. So one of the pathways is an increase in uptake of fast twitch motor units from it, because there's not enough oxygen present to metabolize for the slow twitch. So hence the first set being the 30 reps. So we're trying to
get rid of the slow twitch.
yeah, and then the second, third, and fourth are probably the stimulating sets and reps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it has a time and a place in people that aren't injured. Would I use it as a main source of training? No, probably not. Not for prolonged periods of time. But I think going back to what I said earlier, with for most people it probably being a novel stimulus and you getting that cell swelling,
Yeah.
that if you're bodybuilding and you are just trying to get big and you're not really too bothered if strength isn't optimally enhanced, then go for it.
Yeah.
Like it is going to have a big hypertrophy stimulus for you. You still will get a little bit stronger, or you still will get stronger just generally. So I don't think there's a downside
I
to it
think that
short term.
Yeah, that aligns quite a lot with, and I think we're probably of similar mindsets with a lot of things. People that can kind of look at a training method, look at the good, look at the bad, but look at the context in which it can be applied. Hi guys, I'm just going to take a brief break in today's podcast to talk to you about the Adapt online strength and conditioning coaching service. At Adapt, we put the athlete first and make sure that the whole program is set up around them, their goals, their sport, and their lifestyle to achieve the best possible performances. Our aim is to deliver an elite level coaching experience that typically isn't always commercially available if not part of a professional club or performance pathway system. We communicate with our athletes on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, making changes in technique and making alterations to the program based on how you're performing on any given day. We also bring in experts from psychologists, nutritionists, and physiotherapists for online educational workshops to make sure we are giving you all the tools necessary to excel in your sport. So if you're looking to take your physicality to the next level and want to invest in yourself, head over to the website at adaptstrength.co.uk for more information, including some success stories of our current athletes, or drop me a message to set up a chat to discuss the options. Hope you're enjoying today's podcast, so let's get back to it. Nobody's making you do just high load resistance training or just BFR. You can do both. You can go into the gym, 5 sets of 5 bench and pull-ups, do a little bit of mid-range work, and then boom, slap them off for a finisher at the end, and then you've ticked all the
100%.
boxes. And that's what I do, so I use it in my training in that exact way because I want both. I want to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more powerful, a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger. I want all those things. So I guess the next step to this then is how do we merge those two things together? We've spoke about what's the acronym for Patellofemoral Pain syndrome?
We'll just stick with PFP.
PFP, okay. So PFP and BFR, where are they merging? What's kind of the research saying? What's it not saying?
So the research into using BFR on people with PFP is limited. It's young. I think at the top of my head, there's 4 or maybe even 5. There's a 5th paper come out recently on its exclusive use in people with patellofemoral pain. So I think the nicest thing from it, if we're detracting from you're going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger without using as much load, which obviously people in pain are load compromised anyway.
Yeah.
So that's obviously nice. But if we take away from that, where I see it being effective is in the short term, it reduces your perceived level of pain and allows. So there's some studies out there showing that it allows for therapeutic loading, so which would be the more kind of traditional rehab stuff. And pain stays lower than what it would without BFR. So it's almost can be used potentially as a bit of an extended warm up to then train the things that are a little bit harder to train with BFR. So like the lateral hip muscles, let's say, because they're obviously proximal to the calf.
So that's interesting. That so just for some people might be a little bit more aware of some of the acute pain relief effects or analgesic effects you can get from doing isometrics if you have tendon pain. So at the end of a warm-up, you do some wall sits or you do some split squat isometrics or whatever, and it's supposed to give a really good analgesic effect for people with jumper's knee or, patellar tendonitis. Is that essentially what you're saying this is, but for PFP?
Yeah, We've seen it there's a little bit of it in tendon research as well now.
Okay.
On that topic, so there's a study by Centner in 2019 who found that the cross-sectional area of the Achilles actually increased with BFR, which blows my mind because it doesn't make any sense when you're thinking that everyone looks to really heavily load the tendon for increases in cross-sectional area. But yeah, they've got increases in cross-sectional area, but also increases in size of the gastroc and increases in strength, which were similar to that of high load, which is really cool and really interesting.
That is interesting. I've never thought of, well, I've thought about like tendon is that the phrase? You know, when it's not muscular hypertrophy, tendon hypertrophy, is that the same? But anyway,
let's go with it.
Size gains in the tendon, you know, and I suppose the tendon is very, I guess what you'd call avascular, doesn't have much of a great blood supply, kind of like a ligament. So I guess that, you know, it's forcing that upon it. Or is it the fact that you're tiring out the gastroc and the soleus so that the tendon has to do a little bit more work, therefore experiences higher load? I don't know. I'm just kind of.
I would say it's a combination of both, mate. Yeah, I think you're stressing the pathway or the way that it works to a greater extent because you're reducing the oxygen content of the surrounding area.
Yeah.
So there's probably a bit of that, but then it's also probably having to likely do a little bit more work because you're then stressing the musculature that's trying to isometrically contract when the tendon's working. So you're stressing it. There's probably a bit more shift because it's getting tired. Therefore, tendon's probably having to do a little bit more work. But there's literally one paper on it, and it's something I'm going to keep an eye on because I think it's really interesting. But back to patellofemoral, very similar sort of idea that it should reduce pain, and it's been shown to reduce pain scores in healthy people as well. So objective pain. So we use something called a pressure pain threshold is usually what we'll see within the pain literature, which is an algometer so it's got it looks like a finger basically with a unit on the top of it. You press it into the area, it reads out kilograms of force. It's 1 centimeter in width, so you're applying a pressure until the person's telling you, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit of pain now, then you stop.
Okay.
So we're seeing that BFR increases that, so they can tolerate a little bit more pressure, which, like from the pain science, we know it's probably nociceptive in nature, so it's inhibiting some of the pathways that tell your brain that, okay, this is sore. And we're seeing that in patellofemoral pain as well. So yeah, I think it's exciting because you could use it. For me, you could use the BFR in a couple of ways. You could use it as the main training stimulus. So you're in the gym, you're doing your leg press, doing your extensions, curls, whatever. Probably more machine-based with BFR because I think it's really tough to hit the higher pressures needed in the lower limb without being assisted through the movement.
Yeah.
So we could do it that way, where we know that, say, for patellofemoral pain, that training the hip and the quads simultaneously is quite an effective treatment method for short-term and to medium-term outcomes. So reducing pain and getting them back running, change direction, that type of task. But there's also the fact that you could potentially use it in a warm-up, modified, to then go out and, so it's really common in runners, to then go out and do some running.
How would you, I guess using it in like an extended warm-up then, you know, if you're using it as a way of kind of creating a little bit of a pain relief effect for the rehab session ahead, would you change the 30-15-15-15 protocol? Would you reduce the pressure, or would you keep it the same? What's your thoughts?
I think I would be looking to reduce the pressure. So we've seen that there's a hypoalgesic effect at a minimum of 40% of LOP.
Okay.
So if I was looking to use it as like just as a pain relief type thing, I would bring it right down to 40, maybe 50, 60, dependent on the person and how they respond to that stimulus, and go from there and then load, because we do see a reduction in perceived pain from 40, which has been shown quite a lot now.
I
So
suppose
I would do that.
it's kind of like a balance there, isn't it? You've got the fact that you want to get the pain relief effect from the BFR, but you almost don't want to fatigue the musculature around the area too much to the point where it causes faulty mechanics or doesn't allow you to get the actual progressive overload of the session ahead. I suppose in my mind, I'm just trying to weigh up those two things a little bit.
100%. Like, I think something that I've had to do recently is so just to talk through like my current studies, just for context. So the first study we're looking at in-depth biomechanics of the way that people with patellofemoral pain move compared to those without. So we're looking at like joint and muscle loads. And then the second one is looking at the effect of different interventions on their perceived pain and if we see a change in biomechanics, because we know that faulty biomechanics can lead into you contracting patellofemoral pain.
Okay.
So I have been piloting different pressures because we'll do the mechanics, then we'll go into the gym and do whichever sort of therapeutic loading we're doing. So it'll be like high load, low LOP BFR. The thought before was to do high LOP BFR, so on and so forth. But I was doing the high load on the leg press, and then I was getting up, and I was like, right, okay, one of my functional movements now is I've got to jump.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not happening. Not with the way that my quad and my hip is feeling. I'm barely going to leave the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the individual responses to BFR are quite different person to person anyway. Yeah. So it's one of them things that you'll have to tinker with. But just as a pain relief thing, I would start at 40% of LOP because we know that will have a drastic reduction in, or a reasonable reduction in perceived pain. And then go about your session as normal, see what happens, see how long it lasts for, tailor it from there. It's almost like that minimum effective dose type.
Yeah.
I would work up until I find it.
Got you. Yeah, start low, gradually add, and then once you've hit it, you've hit it. Cool.
Yeah, that's it.
So with that, this kind of segueing off in a slightly different direction. One of the things I was thinking about, when I was kind of thinking around this chat, is when I've done blood flow restriction, I've done the exact same thing of using it in warm-ups because I'd heard people kind of speaking around the pain effect, but also a way of getting the musculature a little bit warmer, getting more blood flow into the area, getting more blood flow into the tendons, just to basically speed up that warm-up process. And one of the things I noticed was, in my mind, a little bit of I have really tight quads just in general, but I noticed like an improvement in my quad flexibility, or at least my perception of that quad flexibility, which is maybe just the pain analgesic effect anyway, of just I can push past, tension a little bit better. But what it kind of got me thinking about was the idea of voodoo flossing, of wrapping something super tight around a joint or a muscle really tight. Have you seen voodoo flossing before? Have you seen Kelly Starrett doing it?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, not loads, but I understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So he basically, for the people that aren't aware, you get like what does he use? He has his own brand, but it's like a bicycle tube, so really kind of tough rubber. You wrap it around your elbow. Let's say you've got golfer's elbow. You wrap it around your elbow, and then you basically get somebody to crank your arm, and move it because you can't do it because you've done it that tight. And the thought process around that is, one, when you take the thing off, you're going to get a big flushing of blood and nutrients to that elbow, which is going to help for tendons that generally don't have a great blood supply. But the other side of it is because you're wrapping something up pretty tight. So you might have 3 inches above the elbow, 3 inches below the elbow, where there's obviously muscles and tendons. Because you're cranking your arm in such a way, you're going to get flexibility benefits in those muscles either side of that joint. So you're basically pinning it down and then making it move. And that's kind of how it felt to me. I don't know if there's much science or any science behind voodoo flossing actually, but all I can say is it worked, and actually gave me some really instant relief. But that was the kind of vibe I got it felt like voodoo floss in my mind is like BFR on steroids, and probably just really kind of, I don't know, off the cuff. Does anything like that? Does that make sense? Is there anything there where you're thinking actually like science supports that or science doesn't support that? Because it felt just so similar.
Yeah, I can't say in terms of like the range of motion because it's not something that I've read or seen. But it not with the movement of the limb, but if you look into sort of the IPC research, so ischemic preconditioning, we've sort of seen some of that pain relief effect from that as well. And what that is a total occlusion of the limb.
Yeah.
Past, so it's at 105%, and then they'll lay there, and that's it. It's passive,
How long?
and that's on, and then 5 minutes.
5 minutes with 105%. So essentially, you're cutting off full blood supply to that area.
3 to 5 minutes, yeah, and then it's not an area that I'm completely, because it's not really what I'm looking at, so I can't really go too far in depth on it.
That sounds gross, mate.
Yeah, so it's a few minutes awful. It's a few minutes of complete, complete restriction, okay. And then followed by a period of reperfusion. So complete, obviously.
Let it flush in.
Yeah. So it sounds really quite similar to that. It's not something I've done. It sounds gross. It's something I'm about to do for somebody else's study, and I'm not looking forward to it. Yeah, but yeah. So it sounds quite similar to that, and there is some evidence to support it. I think if we're going on like what we can do with BFR as well in terms of like a warm up, is there's absolutely no reason you couldn't just jump on a bike.
Okay.
So I've done some sort of.
Go on.
Carry on, mate. Go on.
So this is going to be one of my questions going forward around the BFR side of, just like cyclical movements, running, biking, cross trainer, whatever. Like, what's the research around that type of thing?
It's good. So I think what was quite interesting is a recent paper that's come out, and they've had people administer BFR, and then they'll do like a walking based intervention, and they'll increase their VO2 max, and that's in trained people.
Okay.
So there's obviously some sort of peripheral sort of adaptations to the limb, so it's a better, probably more efficient delivery of oxygen to the limb, which is then for increasing their VO2. Which that's new. I read that last week, I think. So that's really interesting. I've done a study on a bike, which was looking at the effects of pain in cycling at different occlusion pressures, and again, like the 14-80% both yielded decreases in pain, and you'll have different periods of so it's a bit like a HIIT sort of session. You do a couple of minutes on, let reperfusion happen, so let the blood flow back in, and then restrict it again, so put the cuff back on for a couple of minutes, and up to like 5 cycles. So that brings pain down, but it also muscle mass and strength go up as well as VO2. So that's a really nice way if people are injured, so like injured athletes or even just semi-load compromised athletes, to just jump on a bike. It's nice, it's short, it's sharp, and we're seeing potentially quite nice benefits from it. Anecdotally, I know that pretty sure it was Wolves came to one of my supervisors for some advice around it, and like they've adopted it really nicely within their sort of return to play and injuries and injury management now. Okay. And they do a lot of aerobic based stuff on bikes with it.
That's so interesting, that, mate. Like, I always try and think of things like a little bit simpler. I'm a bit thick and a bit ditzy. Like, so the idea of like wrapping up your limb, putting it just below your hip, so you got it on your legs. You get on a bike, or a walking or whatever. So you're not actually making necessarily changes to the respiratory system in a sense. There's no lung changes, but obviously because the lung and all the oxygen content goes to your legs, we're just improving the way your legs use the oxygen you've got. That's essentially what you're saying. Yeah. So it's the economy of the muscle, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, cool. And the delivery and sort of improving, because you're just stressing the arterial system so much that it's going to have to adapt.
Yeah, so it's your
Um,
buffering and all that type of thing, I'm guessing.
yeah, probably increases of like surface levels of veins, arteries, that type of thing as
Yeah,
well. Um, so if you're thinking back to like Martin Bouchard's like book on central and peripheral adaptations, we're probably looking more towards the peripheral side of the adaptations that are occurring with BFR in endurance exercise, well, endurance in sort of
yeah,
aerobic exercise.
sick. No, that's cool. And I guess another question I've got, I'm firing them off, mate, 'cause I'm going. So the recovery side of, the passive side of using BFR, what's the research around that? Is there any research, or is this kind of really anecdotal at the moment?
I think it's new. It's very new. It's
Hmm.
not something I know too much about, and it's not something that I've gone out of my way to read on because it's not something I've had to administer or um, anything. Yeah, so I think it has merit because of the things that we've sort of spoken around in terms of like uh, the reperfusion element of what's going on. And anecdotally, it seems like athletes are getting on great with it. But sort of past that, I can't pass too much comment because it's not something that I've gone out of my way to read enough around.
Mm. I think in my mind it does make a lot of sense, and I think if it is passive in nature, you don't have to do anything other than just slap on some cuffs and just sit and watch TV, or if you're on a coach home, it does just make sense to me.
Hmm.
One of my friends, he's the S&C coach for the ice hockey team in Berlin, so Berlin Ice Tigers. Yeah, that's right. Um, and he uses it with them. They've all kind of bought their own units, so they've got an entire team that have just bought their own. I think they might have bought the Saga ones, to be fair. Um, so like I don't know, probably 300 quid for an upper and a lower body kit set, and that's what they do because they do a lot of traveling around Europe and all that type of thing. And he just gets them on the bus, boom, slap it on. I think he might do a 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off, times three.
Yeah.
So 15 total minutes of being restricted. And it's one of the things, I'd love to I need to do some digging, to be honest with you. I think that's one of the things I need to do. I need to trial it myself, but I'm thinking more for some of my mountain bike athletes. Because the way their mountain biking like weekends work is they go on a Tuesday, they travel on a Tuesday, they get there on a Wednesday, they'll have practice on a Thursday, they'll have qualifiers on a Friday, and then they'll have like a race weekend essentially. So there's a lot of time, one on the bike, or a lot of time doing like track walk, and just generally the track walks, mate, are so steep. Top to bottom of the steepest mountain in Ben Nevis. It's stupid, and I'm just thinking, is that something I could use, or do I need to? Yeah, it's just something that I think I'm going to look into because I think that could be just a really easy win. They do a lot of massage stuff. That's
Hmm.
something that's kind of baked into the sport. Is they do get a rub down after every day. Um, so maybe this is
But
just
and then
something.
if you think about like the processes that a massage is going to take them through, it's just going to promote increased blood flow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which is all that passive BFR is going to do in them parts of reperfusion. So I
hmm,
would say like the mechanisms behind that are probably very similar
yeah,
in the terms of how they're adapting. So like if you haven't got the money or the facilities or someone to come and do the nice massage and increase some of the blood flow to the area, I can't see a reason why using it passively as a recovery method would be a bad thing.
yeah,
We know from like the literature, even training with it is really recoverable. You can train with it 5-6 times a week
mm,
and not feel too bad. So like I can't talking from like a commonsensical side of things because I don't really think there's much research into it yet. Um, I would say that it's there's not a downside to it,
yeah, yeah. Other
which
than spending money, so that potentially wasting your time, but it's not like you're just going to be sat there doing nothing, just staring at a wall. You're probably going to be watching TV or on a bus when it's dead time anyway.
But I mean, in the money aspect of things, anyway, there's absolutely no reason you couldn't go for a practical BFR approach, which is using the knee sleeves, using something elasticated to administer it yourself. See the effects of that, and then if it works, if you feel good from it, great. Go out and invest and actually put some money into your recovery, which I would recommend investing into, like air bands or something like that, because you know what you're administering to yourself in terms of the percentages. So there's a couple of studies out there that show that you can't really even teach people what a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 is on their LOP.
Mate, I can remember when we first started doing it. Oh god, this is bad. We first started doing it. We was in Pure Gym. I had my knee sleeves, knee wraps, sorry, the elasticated ones. And one of the lads who he's one of the boys who we used to train with occasionally. He was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm doing BFR." He's like, "Oh, cool." And this is before, I wasn't even a personal trainer really at this point, so I probably had no liability. But he's like, "Yeah, what do you do?" I said, "Literally, mate, just wrap it up, get it round there. You do your 30, 15, 15, 15, bang in, big arms, you're sorted." And
Limbs got blue.
Mate, he rang me like 2 days later, like, "Mate, I've got gangrene." I was like, "Do you even know what gangrene is?" But he said, "My arms are green." I was like, I don't know what you've done, but it's probably not great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that is like one of the problems with it is if you're going to do that, and you're going to do the sort of if you want to research it, it's practical BFR. Is that you can really overshoot the mark. So some of the studies I've seen said like full occlusion usually happens at around 200 millimeters of mercury. Some of the studies I've seen where people are trying to administer it to themselves have gone up to 300.
Yeah.
And it's only a couple of people out of say 30, but that's still way too much to exercise with and train with. So err on the side of caution if you're going to do it, definitely. But it's one of the things that's worth it. And I think we've all been there. So like the beginning of lockdowns, I had not a lot to train with. We made a little farm gym, didn't have that much load, and had a go.
Yeah.
I think the first time I did it way too tight. Second time I did it nowhere near enough. And then you sort of just find that, you find that sweet spot. But if you're going to do it, definitely I would invest. At least you know what's going on. It's safer.
Yeah.
Because you know what's going on. You know what occlusion pressure you're at.
How much are air bands?
But I think air bands are similar to what you said earlier. I think for an upper lower set, they're about 320. We don't use that's just from some research that I've done. We use a company called Delphi. I think they're sort of the original. They're really, really expensive. They're brilliant. They're the gold standard. They're medical grade. Research level standard. That's why we obviously use them. I think, like, if it's all right with you, I think there's some like considerations with buying like your
go for it
BFR cuffs. Just because there's so many different brands out there, and I've had a few questions before, and it's like, what ones do I buy? And I'm like, mate, these are the considerations. There's probably 30 different brands out there. So the size of the cuff. So in terms of like the width is important. The less width, the higher the pressure to occlude the limb, which then becomes uncomfortable. Like if you've got a really thin one and you've got it on your quad, it's gonna really, I'm gonna say it's gonna hurt. It's not nice. So we want like a decent size width, and that's why there's upper and lower sets when you look at things, so that they're tailored to obviously the upper and lower parts of the body. Conical in shape, so like an ice cream cone, so it contours to the shape of the muscle and the shape of the limb. So that again brings down your LOP a little bit, which again for comfort is nice. And then I think like what the air bands do and what other companies have done is you want to find something that finds your LOP and automates that for you, because you can still buy ones with the Doppler and try and do it that way. But just if you can find an automated one that's within your price range, it's going to be a lot
Simple.
quicker for you, a lot more simple. So I think they're the biggest ones. And you're starting to probably look at a little bit more money, but you want ones that relax and contract with the muscle if possible.
Mm.
So if you're thinking, because I know that Delphi ones do that, and I haven't tried that many other brands, so it's hard for me to say, but you're thinking about the tension in the muscle whilst you're doing, so say, like a leg extension. Muscle and the diameter of the upper leg is going to increase in size as you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if your cuff can't adjust to that whilst you're performing the rep, your LOP is actually varying as
Yeah.
you're doing it. So while the muscle's contracted, you're at quite a lot more occlusion than what you are then in the rested state.
That makes perfect
So
sense, mate.
that's just another
I've
thing.
never thought about that, but yeah, it's common sense that, but not
And
common.
then yeah, and when you're applying it as well, then off the back of that, uh, it's something that the literature doesn't state too much anymore, but they measure LOP in the position that you're going to perform the exercise. So if you're on a bike, measure your LOP on the bike and
Yeah.
go from there, because it can change depending on whether you're sitting, standing, kneeling, lying. So I would measure in the position that you're going to be, or if you want to use it for multiple exercises, obviously that's ball leg, so do it lying down.
Yeah. Got you. Okay. Mate, that's sick. That's it. I feel like from that just little bit of information at the end, that's just super valuable. Because no doubt there'll be a few questions of people thinking, actually, is it worth just playing around with?
Hmm.
And I think, well, yeah, mine were about 300 quid. I used the Saga Fitness ones. I haven't used earbands before. I actually, I was using the leg ones the other day, and I felt one of them pop. And I was like, oh shit. And essentially what had happened, I think what had happened is the air pump, which is the little badge that you see, had detached from the valve around the actual cuff. So what do you call it? An air bladder or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it detached. I was like, fuck, proper gutted. But it's one of those, it's technology in the sense, I sent them an email, I think it's popped. They sent me like a few things to try and fix it. Just really easy pressing certain bits didn't work, and they just sent me a new pair anyway. So that was buzzing.
Ideal.
But I guess that's the other side of what I've kind of found. Like we've wrapped up, your arms and your legs, and it takes a little while. You sometimes need a partner to do it for your upper limb. It gets really awkward. I found some of the annoying bits about it being connected to your phone or technology in general is technology isn't perfect. It does sometimes make our life really simple, but because you get so used to how simple it is, when it breaks, it's like, holy fuck. Mate, have you
No,
ever had like the Wi-Fi in your house turn off or your phone just doesn't work? It's like you feel like you're in the wilderness. It's like, oh, I can't do anything. I can't survive now. It's so bad. It's awful.
mate, it's a weekly thing. So for the study, I use like the 3D analysis, and so we use Vicon. When it runs, perfect, absolute dream. On marker up, on go, move around, happy days, you're done.
Yeah.
When it doesn't work, oh my god, it's the hardest thing to troubleshoot, and it just ruins your day.
Yep.
Like tech can just ruin your
It
day.
honestly does. Like one of the things that's fucking me off at the minute is Instagram. For such a probably multi-million, trillion, but whatever it is, they've got billions of money and people working for them. Every time I upload a video at the minute, it just turns the sound off and goes like hisses at me for some reason. I've tried 5 times today and it's still hissing at me. But yeah, technology can fuck off. Right then, mate, I want to wrap up. So
Yeah,
thank you very much
spot
for
on.
your time, mate. That was absolutely quality. I know there's going to be loads of takeaways for people. But I think the other
I
side
hope
of it
so.
is if this has kind of piqued your interest a little bit, just do your own reading. Do your own reading, have a little look into some of the different resources that are out there. I don't know if you've got any kind of ones that you think would be appropriate for people to look at. I don't know if there's any off the top of your head.
Yeah, so as is a nice starting place, I think. So Stephen Patson, my supervisor, he's got a paper out. I think it's 2019, 20, something like that, fairly recent, which is like methodology and considerations for applying blood flow blood flow restriction. So I think that's a really nice start place because it gives you some ideas behind training with BFR in the gym, aerobically, and also a little bit of IPC stuff. So if it will cover a nice broad range, and it will also give you some rabbit holes to dive down because there'll be obviously references that you think, oh, that's interesting, and then read off.
Yeah.
And then if you want to going into the practical BFR side because you want to try it and you don't want to buy a cup straight away, Jeremy Loenneke's lab. So do most of that sort of stuff, and their stuff's really good. So I'd have a look at their papers. I can't think of a title of one off the top of my head because he's got so many. But
what I'll do, mate, is I'll put all that information in the show notes below so people can just click on it and I'll take you through. I'll do the heavy lifting for them. But yeah, I just want to thank you, mate. That was absolutely sick. Buzzing from that. I know there's going to be loads of takeaways. In terms of kind of finding out a little bit more around the stuff that you do, is there any particular social media or anything like that you kind of use?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on social media and you can follow me if you want to. I'm probably not too big on using it consistently. I think I'm going to put stuff out on Twitter when I publish. I'm going to start to share things I think are interesting around patellofemoral pain and BFR more regularly soon. So that would be just at Jourdain, JOURDAIN B _ for Twitter. And that would be the main place of like sharing information from me, and it's not too regular. But if you have questions and you want recommendations and stuff, just reach out. I'm really happy to have a chat.
Sick. Nice one, mate. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Adapt Performance podcast. Let me know what you thought about the episode by leaving a review or sending me a direct message. I'm all for receiving the honest feedback to make sure the episodes grow and get better and better. Like, share, subscribing and following all goes a long way to making sure the podcast reaches the right people. Thanks a lot. Catch you next time.